Okay, I'm going to have to skirt over a few sub-characters here that I really like. I'm going to tie up and talk briefly about Laguna and Co, as their significance is, it can't be understated really in looking at this game, and they are great characters. So, I'm going to have to miss off people like Adia and Sid, both of whom I really like, and Alone. But to be honest, they're very straightforward characters, and they're almost just set pieces in this storyline that help tie things together and compels the story to move along. So, yeah, I mean, I like them, and I wanted to talk about some of the cooler stuff like the Moonbuzz and those little nice little things that are unique to Final Fantasy VIII. But they're cool, and I have no sort of gripes with them at all. But there's not really much else to say about them apart from they're good additions to the cast, and they help tie the game and the story and the atmosphere really of Final Fantasy together. So, okay, let's talk about Laguna now. Despite being present for less than a quarter of the game, this guy is a remarkably significant character that influences or indirectly touches on much of the events that transpire. To name just a few, there's his inspiring of Cypher to become the Sorceress's knight through the movie he was in. His love for Rinoa's mother, Julia, which ties him indirectly to Rinoa. The weird relationship he has with those little orange moonbars, who go on to build a statue of him as a side quest in the Shumi village. His guardianship of Alone, and of course, most importantly, his being Squall's father, to name but a few. He's accountable for a massive amount of this game, and that's what makes this storyline so fantastic. Everything is tied together so neatly, and in a lot of ways, Laguna is more significant, perhaps maybe, than Squall and the contemporary party that we play as. And really, to get all these subtleties of him, you need to really be participating with the story and paying attention to what's happening. Now, although it's never outrightly said that Laguna is Squall's father, I love the sort of references they make to this, not just in terms of narrative, but also in metaphor and symbology again. Laguna is the Italian root word of lagoon, and this refers to an isolated body of water. So this of course establishes a connection between him and Squall on an elemental level. But where Squall is named for a turbulent body of water, Laguna is named for a calm, tranquil sort of water. And the fact that a lagoon is isolated from the sea too, it refers specifically to an isolated body of water. This perhaps nods at Laguna's geographical and physical detachment from the contemporary events of the game. And of course, his son Squall, who he doesn't meet until, right near the end of the game for the first time. So this makes for sound symbolism regarding these two characters and the way the plot is structured in general, because it, of course, confides him largely to separate events that take place in the past. And it's a testament, again, to Square really paying attention to this sort of detail and these intricacies. And, you have to, well, firstly, have a grasp of etymology, I suppose, but, it's just these sort of... these symbolic elements. I love this sort of thing personally. I think it shows such a degree of thought that goes into the whole shaping of the world and the narrative, and this idea of fate. Really, that I think permeates Laguna's character very, very much so. Now, it's hard to paint Laguna in a bad light because he's such a great character, but his impulsive, almost to the degree where he's sort of a dumb, sort of optimistic guy, it really does leave a trail of chaos in its wake. He saves Esfar from an evil sorceress, and he's a very kind of righteous sort of guy. But by the time we actually start the game as Squall, in contemporary time, he's broken the heart of both Julia and Rain and left them. He's deafened his best friend by throwing him off a cliff, and he's abandoned his unborn child, which, okay, admittedly, we'll give him that one, he didn't know that until much later. This said, I do really like that Laguna is a sort of bros before hoes kind of guy. I don't mean to sound crude with that, it's the only way I can really think about terming it. But it was really needed to counterbalance the overtly romantic relationship of Squall and Rinoa, which was, a relationship thing, that was a love thing. So, if Laguna were to end happily ever after with Julia or Rain, for example, it would make for quite a trite, boring storyline because everyone's falling in love. However, this wasn't the case. He has this camaraderie with Kiros and Ward that runs very deep and demands precedence over pretty much everything else in his life. They are posited in this game as each other's reason for being, which ties again to relationships as an antidote for the existential self and the crisis of the self and finding a reason to be in the world. Kiros, Ward, and Laguna have that relationship with one another. So yeah, it kind of balances nicely against Squall's party, and because Squall's party of the present, as I mentioned, they're orphans and they have this internal crisis going on. They're not old enough. They haven't worked this out for themselves yet. So having this break point with the dream sequences, where we have Laguna's party that are sure of themselves, they're confident of their place in the world, and also, perhaps most importantly, provide great comic relief and effect from the more dramatic elements of the present. This is just a great plotline to run in tandem, and great characters to have run in tandem with some quite serious themes. I think it's summed up best by Kiros when he goes to visit Laguna in Windhill, where he states, "Life's no fun without you around for entertainment," or something like that, which really, it kind of crystallises the idea of these three quite well. Now, for his part, Kiros is an awesome sub-character. He and Ward, much like Raijin and Fujin, serve as great counterparts to the more significant character in the group. And through their interactions, it really helps develop our idea of who Laguna is. Indeed, if we look at the etymology of their names, Kiros it seems to be a derivative of the Latin Kairos, which is basically Kiros with an A in it. But this loosely translates to opportunity or opportune moment. Similarly, Ward, who... of course, Ward is a more contemporary word, which is a word for guardian, and I think these two words neatly surmise the traits of these three characters and how their story unfolds throughout the game, because of course they are chances, but they also sort of look after one another as well. I think what's most also significant about these two is that, unlike some sub-characters in other games who have been pretty irrelevant, and, okay, for example, Biggs, Wedge and Jesse from Final Fantasy VII, for maybe the first quarter of Disc 1, these are quite important sub-characters, but to be honest, I mean, they elicited zero emotional response from me at all, and by comparison, I actually really care about Kiros and Ward and the adventures they have, and I think it's unfair, to consider them solely as satellites of how we perceive Laguna, and it's just kind of a shame that there was no real room in the plot for further development with these two. Kiros especially, because I just love the way that his pragmatism and logical nature always calls out Laguna on when he's being ridiculous. But then, the strength of his friendship for him always wins out, and he goes along with whatever crazy plan Laguna's hatched anyway. That's a really cool sort of relationship. And again, I like Ward as well, but the problem we have with him is that he loses his voice pretty early on in the game, and although it's stated by characters numerous times that you know what he's thinking because of his eyes, the limitations of Final Fantasy and the fixed camera angle, it doesn't allow this to be, sort of capitalised upon, by the development team. So, it's kind of a shame, but we have the idea of these three characters as a very tight knit group, and all three of them are very funny, which is great.